Assalamualaikum everyone. So for today's lesson, we are going to learn about adjectives, especially the comparative and superlative adjective. But before we move on to comparative and superlative adjective, first you need to understand the adjective rules. I have listed down a couple of rules, so let's look at it one by one. So the first rule is that a comparative mainly begins with more, followed by than, and a superlative mainly begins with the and followed by most. So what does that mean? For example, the adjective dangerous. If you want to change it into a comparative adjective, you need to add more at the front of the word and add than at the end of the word. For example, more dangerous than. But if you want to change it into a superlative adjective, you need to add the most at the front of the word. So it will be dangerous, more dangerous than, the most dangerous. Same goes for the next example, handsome. You need to add more at the front and then at the end of the word for comparative and add the most at the front of the word for superlative. So it will be handsome, more handsome than, the most handsome. Now, for the second rule, if an adjective ends with an E, you need to add R or SD at the end of the word. For example, the adjective nice ends with an E. Therefore, if you want to change it into a comparative form, you need to add R at the end of the word. So it will be nice, nicer. For superlative, you need to add ST. So it will be nice, nicer, nicest. Same goes for rare. You need to add an R at the end, so it will be rare, rarer. And for superlative, you add ST, rarest. Same goes for polite, politer, politest. For the third rule, if an adjective ends with a vowel and a consonant, you must double the consonant and add ER or EST at the end. For example, the adjective wet, if you want to change it into a comparative form, you need to double the consonant T and you need to add ER. So it will be wet, wetter. For superlative, you still need to double the consonant but add EST instead. So it will be wet, wetter, wettest. Same goes for hot. Hot, you double the T plus ER, it will be the comparative form, which is hotter, and you double the consonant, but add EST, it will be hottest, which is the superlative form. Same goes for big, bigger, and biggest. The fourth rule is that if an adjective ends with a consonant and Y, you need to change the Y into I and add ER or EST. For example, the adjective angry ends with a consonant and a Y. Therefore, if you want to make it a comparative form, you need to change the Y into I and add ER. So it will be angry, angrier. And for superlative form, add EST. So it will be angry, angrier, and angriest. Same goes for the second example, heavy. You change the Y into an I and then you add ER, it will be heavier. But for superlative, add EST and it will be heavy, heavier, heaviest. Same goes for dry, drier, and driest. And the final rule is that they are also irregular adjectives. For example, the adjective bad has a different form of comparative and superlative. For example, the bad and comparative form of bad is worse and the superlative form of bad is the worst. Same goes for good, better, the best, and little, less, and least. Now that you learned about the adjective rules, so how does one create a sentence that contains comparative or superlative adjective? So let's look into the structure. So for comparative, there are three main structures, which are affirmative, negative, and question. So let's look at it one by one. So the first structure is affirmative. The formula is subject plus verb to be plus comparative adjective plus then and plus object. So the V to be here refers to verb to be. For example, a lion is more dangerous than a deer. So the subject here is a lion and the verb to be is and the comparative adjective is more dangerous and then you need to add than and then plus object, a deer. So based on the rules that we have learned, if you want to make it in comparative adjective, you need to add more at the front of the adjective and then at the end of the adjective. As for this example, more dangerous than. Next example, elephants are heavier than tigers. The subject is elephants, the verb to be is are, plus comparative adjective heavier, plus than, plus object tigers. So based on the rule that we have learned before, the adjective heavy ends with a Y. Therefore, in order to make it a comparative form, you need to change the Y into I plus ER. So it will be heavy, heavier. The next example is corpse flower is rarer than a rose. The subject is corpse flower, the verb to be is, the comparative adjectives rarer plus than plus object a rose. So based on the rules that we have learned before, the adjective rare ends with an E. Therefore, if you want to change it into a comparative adjective, you just need to add R at the end of the word. So it will be rare, rarer. The next structure is the negative structure. The formula is subject plus verb to be plus not as plus adjective plus s plus object. For example, summer is not as hot as winter. The subject here is summer. The verb to be is plus not as plus adjective plus s and plus object winter. Now you need to keep in mind that here for this structure you need to put the adjective not in its comparative form. So here it will be just summer is not as hot as winter, not as hotter as or as hottest as. You just use the adjective hot. The next example is the moon is not as bright as the sun. So the subject is the moon plus verb to be is plus not as plus adjective bright plus as plus object the sun. And the next example is a tiger is not as fast as a cheetah. So the subject is a tiger plus verb to be is plus not as plus adjective fast plus as plus object a cheetah. Now the last structure for comparative is the question structure. So the formula is verb to be plus subject plus comparative adjective plus then plus noun or phrase. For example, is the Atacama Desert drier than the Sahara Desert? So the verb to be is plus subject the Atacama Desert plus the comparative adjective drier plus then plus noun or phrase the Sahara Desert, and don't forget to put the question mark at the end of the sentence. So based on the rules that we have learned before, the adjective dry ends with Y. Therefore, you need to change the Y into I and add ER. So it will become dry, drier. The next example is a whale bigger than a shark? So the verb to be is, the subject a whale, the comparative adjective bigger plus than plus noun or phrase a shark and a question mark. So the adjective big here ends with a consonant, and before that it ends with the vowel I. Therefore, you need to double the consonant and plus ER. So it becomes big, bigger. The last example is Mount Everest higher than Mount Kinabalu? So the verb to be is plus subject Mount Everest plus comparative adjective higher plus than plus noun or phrase Mount Kinabalu and a question mark. So the adjective high here ends with a consonant. Therefore, you need to add ER. So it will become height, higher. So now, let's learn how to create a sentence with superlative adjective. So there are three main structures, which are affirmative, negative, and the question structure. So let's look one by one. So for affirmative structure, we have subject plus verb to be plus the plus superlative adjective plus noun or phrase. For example, the cherry blossom is the most beautiful tree in Japan. So the subject is the cherry blossom plus verb to be is plus the plus superlative adjective most beautiful plus noun or phrase tree in Japan. So based on the adjective rules, if you want to change the adjective into a superlative adjective, you need to add the most at the front of the adjective, which in this case, the most beautiful. The next example, the blue whale is the largest animal on earth. So the subject is the blue whale plus verb to be is plus the plus superlative adjective largest plus noun or phrase animal on earth. So based on the rules before, adjective large ends with an E. Therefore, you just have to add st at the end of the word in order to make it superlative. So it will become the largest. The next example, the Amazon rainforest is the most diverse ecosystem on the planet. The subject, the Amazon rainforest, plus verb to be is plus the plus superlative adjective most diverse plus noun or phrase ecosystem on the planet. So the superlative adjective here must contain the most at the front of the adjective in order to make it superlative. In this case, it is the most diverse. Let's move on to the next structure, which is the negative structure. So the formula is subject plus verb to be plus not plus the plus superlative adjective plus noun or phrase. For example, the Atlantic forest is not the wettest place on earth. So the subject is the Atlantic forest plus verb is plus not plus the plus superlative adjective plus noun or phrase placed on earth. So for the adjective wet, it ends with a vowel E and a consonant T. Therefore, in order to make it a superlative adjective, you have to double the consonant T and then add EST at the end, which in this case will be the wettest. So the next example is the giraffe is not the fastest animal in the world. So the subject is the giraffe plus a verb to be is plus not plus the plus superlative adjective fastest plus noun or phrase animal in the world. So the superlative adjective for fastest, you need to add est at the end of the adjective. So it will be the fastest. Another example is the Sahara Desert is not the most humid environment. So the subject is the Sahara Desert plus verb to be is plus not and the plus superlative adjective most humid plus noun or phrase environment. So the next structure is the question structure. So the formula is who or what or which plus verb to be plus the plus superlative adjective plus noun or phrase, and don't forget the question mark at the end of the sentence. For example, what is the most interesting place on earth? Question mark. So here at the front of the sentence, there is what plus verb to be is plus the plus superlative adjective most interesting plus noun or phrase place on earth, and you need to add question mark at the end of the sentence. The next example is what is the tallest animal in the world? So at the front of the sentence is what plus a verb to be is plus the plus superlative adjective tallest plus noun or phrase animal in the world and a question mark. And the last example is which is the most dangerous predator in the ocean? So at the front of the sentence is which plus verb to be is plus the plus superlative adjective most dangerous and plus noun or phrase predator in the ocean and a question mark at the end of the sentence. So now, what and when do we use it? For comparative, there are two ways that you can use comparative adjective for, which are to compare two people, animals, or things, or even places between each other, and then also to show preferences or differences. But for superlative, you can use it to compare one part of a whole group to all the rest of the group, or to show the highest or lowest degree. So when do we use comparative adjective? The first one is to compare two people, animals, things, or even places. For example, a cheetah is faster than a horse. As you can see, for this sentence, there is a comparison between two animals, which are the cheetah and a horse. Same goes for the next example, the sun is hotter than the moon. It is the comparison between sun and the moon. And also for the third example, the cat is friendlier than the dog. Also a comparison between the two animals, a cat and a dog. We also use comparative adjective to show preferences or differences. For example, the smell is nastier than usual. Let me give you a situation. For example, you walk down a road one day and then the smell is very bad. So the next day, you use the same road, but the smell is nastier than usual. Same goes for the next example. The book is easier to read than that book. So as you can see here, it is showing the differences between two books, which is one is easier to read than the other one. And same goes for the third example, Malaysia is hotter than Japan in December, which show the differences in the weather of the two countries. You can use superlative to compare one part of a whole group to all the rest of the group. For example, the blue whale is the largest animal in the ocean. For this sentence, it is used to show that the blue whale has the highest degree in terms of the size within the category of the animals in the ocean. For second example, the cheetah is the fastest land animal. The cheetah here has a highest degree of speed compared to other land animals. And for the third example, the Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on Earth. The Pacific Ocean here is the largest ocean compared to other oceans in the world. You can also use superlative adjective to show the highest or the lowest degree of something. For example, Mount Everest is the highest mountain in the world. In this sentence, it is to show that among other mountains in the world, in terms of the height, Mount Everest is the highest mountains among all the other mountains. And for second example, the Sahara is the driest desert on the planet. This sentence shows that the Sahara shows the highest degree in terms of the dryness compared of all places on the planet. And for the third example, the blue whale is the largest animal on Earth. This sentence shows that among all animals, not just animals in the oceans, the blue whale shows the highest degree of size among all the other animals. That is all from me. I hope you understand today's lesson and I'll see you next time.